It's such an honor to be here with all of you today. I wish we were in person and not Zooming, but I'm happy to beam into your event about civic engagement. And I've been thinking of all the advice I have for you. I may go a little overboard, but I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jean, so much for being here. I am excited to hear your story, and I'm excited for the ambassadors to hear your story as well. I know you're incredibly busy on your book tour right now, so thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to answer a few questions with us. So let's get started. First question, describe how civic engagement and volunteerism has been central to your career in public service.
It's such a great question. And I'm going to start with my childhood. And my parents, I grew up on a farm in Missouri. And my dad never graduated from high school, but he was one of the smartest people I knew. And it wasn't until I was all growing up that I looked back and realized what true points of light they were and how engaged they were in our community and specifically in civic engagement. One of my earliest memories is my mom and dad fighting on election day about who they were going to vote for. And I don't remember if it was the president or the Senate. I don't remember what the race was, but they were going to vote for complete opposite people. And it wasn't the president, because it was a special election that there was only one person on the ballot, one race on the ballot, and they got ready to go to the polls to vote. And again, I lived out in the country, so they had to drive about 5 miles. And I said to them, I was a smart ass 10-year-old, I think. I said, why are you voting? I said, why are you going? Because you're going to cancel each other out. So I was old enough to figure that out. So I said, what's the point of you going? Because your votes are going to cancel each other. And they turned around and they looked at me and they were both appalled that I would suggest they not vote. And they said, voting is one of the most important things we do in this country. It's one of the best things you can do to make life better for us. And we would never dream of not voting. And off they went, still fighting about trying to talk the other into vote for the other. But, it made a huge impression on me, particularly later in life. And I thought about them every time there's an election and I read about the election results. And, it's always ridiculous how many people don't vote. And I think of my parents going out on a cold winter night to cancel each other out, but it was all about the principle of it. And of course, this is a long answer to your question, Brooke, but I'm just going to go right into President Bush. Of course, working for President Bush, I learned so much from him, but I would love to share with all of the ambassadors one of the most important things I learned from him. It wasn't that long ago. He died in 2018. So I'm thinking this is a couple of years before he died. And I was just unloading on him how I was really mad at the Republican Party, basically. And I told him I was no longer a Republican. And he looked at me and he said, you were never that good of one to begin with. It's one of my favorite things he ever said to me. And I grew up a Democrat and I basically independent, but I was just complaining about everything political, about everyone in office. I was just being a typical Monday morning quarterback. And George Herbert Walker Bush looked at me and he said, Jean, when was the last time you went to a precinct meeting? When was the last time you went to a city council meeting or a school board meeting? When is the last time you actively campaigned for a candidate, a local candidate? He says, when was the last time you got involved and showed up? He says, that's what you need to do. You have a right to complain, but you've got to get involved. And you know what? The answer to all of his questions was never. I never went to a city council meeting, never went to a school board meeting. I not got involved in any local elections. And it was humbling and sobering. And he was absolutely right. You've got to get involved. Otherwise, you really don't have the right to complain about what's going on.
That's such a both of the stories are just beautiful stories. And I also want to remind the ambassadors that you worked with President Bush 41 during his tenure when he created Points of Light. Is that right?
Well, he actually created, that is correct. He created Points of Light in the White House. And then again, it's still alive and well today, which is very exciting. And he felt really passionately about how important volunteerism is in this country. And just recently, Brooke, Points of Light has really expanded its umbrella to include civic engagement. I mean, we were always very focused on what I would consider just sort of the basics of volunteerism, which is very important. Teach someone to read, volunteer in a hospital, volunteer in a food pantry, volunteer in a homeless shelter, just get involved. But we just recently started this whole civic engagement part of the program, and that you've got to be engaged in your communities. And again, I will go back to my dad. He was chairman of the local rural electric cooperative, which brought electricity to the farmers in Missouri. He took the time to get involved, and what two great role models for me. I'm 65 years old, and I would tell all the ambassadors, I don't think I've done enough. And once I get done with the book tour for my book, this is sort of a weird way of putting this. I serve on a lot of nonprofit boards. I have been extremely supportive for 25 years of all of President Bush's great causes, but I'm not sure I ever got my hands dirty, if that makes sense. I'm the person getting everyone else. The only time I really got my hands dirty is I went to New Hampshire to campaign for Jeb Bush in 2016. I took President Bush's advice. I organized about 70 people, and we went to New Hampshire the weekend before the New Hampshire primary. And it was grueling and hard work. But I looked at the Republican candidates, and I really thought Jeb would be the best president. And for all of you who are Democrats or independent, ignore the politics of this. What was important is I got involved. And that was really the first time I got my hands dirty. So in 2022, I want to come back and talk to the ambassadors and tell them how I got my hands dirty.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And you're exactly right. In fact, the ambassadors, we did an activity with Points of Light's Civic Circle and all of the different ways to get involved. So I love how your message is aligning with that. So next question for you. What is one civic engagement challenge that you have faced, or a challenge that you believe faces future generations? Either way.
I think I'm going to answer the latter. And I may be a good, well, no, I'm not a good example of this. Just because I worked for President Bush for 25 years, I guess I've been engaged forever, but like I said, I'm not sure I ever got my hands dirty. I mainly helped supported him in his projects. Here's the advice that I would give to the ambassadors and to all young people. And this includes civic engagement and just volunteerism in general. Mrs. Bush used to use this great quote. I think it was from Mother Teresa. She used to always say in her speeches, everybody wants to save the world, but nobody wants to do the dishes. And I think sometimes we all get overwhelmed by how big a problem is. And we feel like, what difference can I make? I can't, what can I do about this? I'm just one person. And Mrs. Bush's point, and actually President Bush's point, was always, you have to start somewhere. And Mrs. Bush would be a great example, or the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. And I remember when she founded the foundation, it was estimated that 38 million Americans could not really read and write. And she felt overwhelmed by that. And she would bring that up once in a while. But then she would always make the point, every person the foundation helped learn to read is important, and it's a victory. And that's how I feel about the problems facing our country. I mean, if you watch the news, if we're sort of in a complicated place right now. Everybody seems so angry and we're so divided. And you think, well, what can I do about that? Well, start at ground zero, start on your street, start in your community. Find somebody you want to support for city council, find somebody you want to support for mayor, find someone you want to support on the local level. It's the advice President Bush gave me. No, you're not going to change the world in one fell swoop, but do the dishes. And just, so my advice is, it's a mistake to think of the big picture. Just think, this is one case where it's okay to think small. And one of the things I've learned with Points of Light and all the daily Points of Light we honor, all these people who've accomplished great things. Sometimes I read about daily Points of Light winners. We recognize someone every single day as a daily point of light. If you read what they did, it almost always started small. The 5,000th point of light was at the White House. The Obamas hosted the 5,000th daily point of light. It was this couple from Iowa who realized that there was a hunger problem in their little hometown in Iowa. And they really started this little program in their community center. And now it's worldwide. Their hunger problem has gone, but they started on their street. So that would be my advice. And I think I'm one of those people who sometimes feels, well, what can I do? And then I go back to George Bush. Go to city council meeting, go to a precinct meeting. I still have it. So I'm hoping the ambassadors will do better than I have, Brooke.
Oh, I love this though. I mean, you're so right. This is a good reminder for myself as well. We think we live in such a large city. It can be a little overwhelming, but you're absolutely right. Start small, start somewhere, start wherever you think it makes sense. Okay, so in your own words, what does lifelong volunteerism mean?
It means that I'm going to start over. I'm going to go back to President Bush. He really lived, one of his favorite quotes, and this was part of Points of Light, was any definition of a successful life must include service to others. And I'll never forget when Hurricane Harvey dumped 50 inches of rain on Houston. What was that, 3 years ago? 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, 2017.
4 years ago, we were in Kennebunkport the day it happened, and our hearts were in Houston. And he was like 91 years old, 92 years old. And he looked at me and he says, Jean, we got to go to work. We got to help. We got to do something. And I really felt he was past time that he needed to get engaged and he had to do something. Well, and I said, well, sir, what did I call George W. Bush? And what did I call the other presidents? He said, I will call the other presidents. And they all got involved. And we started this fund called One America Appeal. And I was just in awe of him, Brooke. He had done so much for the country. He'd done so much for Houston, but it was never enough. He never, ever thought it was enough. I don't know how many times I heard him say, you have to do more. And again, the mistake would be when thinking of lifelong volunteerism, again, the mistake would be that you're going to do what George Bush did and you're going to start this fund. It's going to raise $45 million. No, it just means when a neighbor is sick, you take them a casserole, or you mow their yard, or on election day, you give someone a ride to the polls, or you, take care of their kids maybe one evening. When it just means always being aware that we have a duty to be a good neighbor and a good citizen. And by the way, that includes voting. I'm obsessed with how important it is to vote. So it is a lifelong obligation, but it also is a joy. It's a privilege. let's replace the word obligation with privilege. It's to be, President Bush had a servant's heart, and we all need to have a servant's heart. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege to give back to your community.
Yeah, this is wonderful. You know, we've talked about what does it mean to be a servant leader, and so your note about having a servant's heart is on point. So thank you.
He had a servant's heart. He maybe was a former president, but he never ever quit wondering how he could make a difference. And so I have something I want to read to the ambassadors, and this is going to seem like a cheap ploy to promote my book about President Bush. It isn't, I promise. The man I knew. I will say that the book's a lot of fun, and writing the book was a lot of fun. But as I was writing it, I realized the man really left us a blueprint on how to live a life well lived. And some of that we talked about today. But for all the ambassadors who are interested in volunteerism and civic engagement, I just want to read something that President Bush wrote about being a point of light, which is what all of you are. I think of points of light as the soul of America. They're ordinary people who reach beyond themselves to touch the lives of those in need, bringing hope and opportunity, care and friendship. By giving so generously of themselves, these remarkable individuals show us not only what is best in our heritage, but what all of us are called to become. I love that quote. I almost cried reading it. I love that quote because it's what you're doing, it's your work, and it's what the ambassadors are doing. You are exactly the kind of people that President Bush was thinking about when he wrote that. And I love that he said, ordinary individuals. You don't have to be a president. You don't have to be a first lady. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be Bill Gates. You don't have to be even brilliant. You just have to have a servant's heart. So I love what you all are doing, and President Bush would be so proud.
Thank you so much, Miss Jean Becker, for taking time out to speak to us today. Your message it gives me goosies just listening to some of the things that you're saying. So thank you again. We appreciate people like you, and good luck with everything else on your book tour.
Thank you, and have good luck with all that you all are doing. I can't wait to hear about more of your adventures.